this workshop. As we heard that the sessions was told that they were adjourned to 3:15, but as many of our panelists, they have other obligations and other workshops after this one, we really need to start. And I'd like to open this workshop, EURid UNESCO workshop about IDNs and multilingualism. It's really an honor to moderate this workshop with such a great panel of great speakers representing different stakeholders of the internet environment. This is the second year that EURid, together with UNESCO, produces this report. And as of this year, we have decided to call it World Report, because the plan is to make it a regular annual report, and a report which people can look at if they like to have a bit more information about IDNs, the value of IDNs for multilingualism, and how these two elements, IDN and multilingualism, they interact together, they contribute to, let's say, for the inclusion of people in the internet. EURid is quite a special registry, because we are a registry under contract with the European Commission, and we have to support 23 languages, not only at IDN level, but also when we provide support to our customers. And eventually those languages, they will become 27 languages in the near future, because there are some changes that are currently discussed at the level of the European Commission. So I'm quite happy to open this workshop, and I would like to introduce immediately Emily Taylor. Emily has worked hard together with UNESCO and EURid to produce this report, and she has investigated the IDN world at the top level, at the second level, and she has made also a comparison of the results that we have obtained with the last year report against the results that we got with this year report. There are some copies, by the way, of the World Report here, paper copies, and you can find also this World Report in PDF on the eurid.eu site. So having said that, I'd like to leave the floor to Emily, and she will introduce the report. She will speak about the IDN's readiness matrix, which is a very fundamental part of the report. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Giovanni, and it's a real pleasure to join this panel and to participate for the second year on the World Report for IDN deployment with EURid and also Unesco. This year we expanded the data sample that we were looking at, and so it's now covering up to 90% of the world's registered domains. Now, of course, we don't have every bit of data for everything, but we hope we can slowly fill in the blanks. I think the significance of the timing of this study is something worth mentioning, in that it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that we've seen the registration of internationalized domain names throughout the string at the top level as well as the second level. And so our study is really marking and will hopefully stay with this process as it really gets underway. There are copies, as Giovanni said, of the report here in the room, so please do take one. But really, just as a very brief overview, we've looked at a quantitative research on the take-up in different countries and regions, and also we show that there is a very strong link with the languages spoken in a country or region and those scripts that the registry chooses to support. It's almost it's over 95% correlation there between that. So this gives us a clue that we believe there should be a very strong link with those internationalized domain names and the content found on the websites associated with them. We look at the timeline. We also look at some general issues that we believe are barriers to the take-up of internationalized domain names, such as the inconsistent representation still in browsers, the inconsistent and the deployment of IDNs in emails, which is only just getting in its infancy, but also the support in applications. For example, Facebook with over 1 billion users, it's still not possible to create a user account with an internationalized domain names. All of these things throw barriers in the path of those who would like to register and use, in our view. We look at the experiences in different country case studies, and then in the analysis, as Giovanni mentioned, we start to build a matrix to help understand why it is that, say, for example, in the Republic of Korea, we see very healthy uptake almost immediately, whereas in other countries and regions that is not the case. So why is this? And our hypothesis is that this depends on two broad factors. The first relates to the conditions in the country itself. Is there, for example, how big is the user base? How homogeneous is the country or region linguistically, culturally? Are there the conditions there that would foster a high uptake? But also, what a broadband penetration like? ISOC study has shown a very high correlation between the infrastructure locally and the presence of local language, and we believe that the same factors apply also for uptake of internationalized domain names. Then, having sort of looked at the country or region, we also believe that the way that the registry locally is run, its registration policies, the price of domains, how well known the brand is locally, and also, crucially, whether or not there is a network of local registrars. I was speaking with Min Jung just before the session started, and she confirmed that in the Republic of Korea they have 31 registrars who are all based in country. Now, those are the classic channel to market, but they are also serving the local nationality with other services, such as web content, web design, hosting, and all of these things that create a virtuous circle, in our view, towards the uptake of multilingual content supported by a multilingual navigation system. So, as you could probably tell, I could go on for hours and hours, but I won't, because there are many interesting people on the panel, and I would like to hand over to Vint Cerf, who very kindly presented the foreword to this World Report. Thank you, Vint.
Thank you very much. I don't plan to take a great deal of time in this initial intervention, but one thing I want to point out is that when the internationalized domain names were first proposed around 2003, a great deal of work went into the design of a system that would allow the use of non-Latin characters drawn from Unicode in such a way that none of the domain name servers and the resolvers would have to change. What this forced on us is an encoding of the Unicode code set in ASCII codes. The process was called Punycode for no good reason. And what basically was done is that an algorithm was found that took the Unicode codes for specific symbols in a particular script and would map them into a series of ASCII representable characters, and that algorithm could be run in reverse to go from the ASCII Punycode version back to the Unicode version of characters, which could then be interpreted and rendered as non-Latin characters from a particular script. So that's one of the reasons that we have this rather odd additional step in mapping these names. In fact, if you look at the ASCII strings for internationalized domain names, they all start with the characters X and N and 2 hyphens. And this was chosen at random by the Internet Architecture Board and done with great secrecy until it was actually chosen, so that nobody went and registered XN-- names in ahead of time in order to interfere with internationalized domain name registration. So that's a reason that we had to do it that way. But there's a second thing that I cannot impress upon you strongly enough. A domain name, in order to be looked up, has to be compared with something that someone has either entered manually or has cut and pasted and put it into the domain name lookup mechanism, for example, a browser search window or address bar. So successful matching is fundamental to the way the domain name system works. Matching in ASCII was very easy. We were insensitive to upper and lower case, for example. And so the ease of deciding that the string the user put in and the string that was registered into the domain name system were the same string was simplified in this original ASCII-based design. When we came into the internationalized design with the Punycode mappings and everything else, it was very important to have a canonical way of representing these non-Latin character strings so that when you looked up something, you had a high probability of finding it and correctly matching every one of the symbols. Matching is fundamental to domain name lookup, and people who were accustomed to using Unicode for purposes of simply representing a particular symbol in a script and then printing it had a lot of trouble understanding why there was more work involved in constraining what the coding was in order to make sure the matching process would work. If you can't do the matching, if it's ambiguous, you can't do a lookup and get back an internet address to go to where the domain name is pointing you. So there were a lot of constraints, and many people got upset that they couldn't write, in an infinitely expressive way a particular character, even though under Unicode terms you could write the same character or a sequence of characters in several different ways. The problem is if you wrote it one way and the registration was done in a different way, you wouldn't match. So this ability to match is fundamental to domain names. The same thing is going to be true with email. Strings to the left of the @ sign have historically been less constrained in the internet world than strings to the right of the @ sign. So domain names are very constrained by the current internationalized domain name rules. Strings to the left of the @ sign to represent a mailbox are less constrained, and therefore we may actually have a bigger challenge in doing matching. That's why this is not a resolved process. Many people get very impatient. They say, I can write anything I want to in Unicode on a web page. What's the problem? And the specific problem is getting the computer to figure out that the way you type something is matchable to something you're looking for example, somebody's mailbox identifier. It's very hard sometimes to help people understand that this is a non-trivial exercise for a piece of software to recognize this is the same string. Human beings look at the rendering and they say it looks the same, it must be the same string. The computer doesn't see it that way, it sees a sequence of symbols. So there's some serious work to be done. In the foreword to this report, I raised an issue having to do with the actual uptake of internationalized domain names. There was much less than I had expected. The model I had anticipated wrongly is that as soon as we had top-level domains that could be expressed using these internationalized scripts, that lots of people who would normally have had internationalized domain names at lower levels in the domain name labels that were level 2, level 3, or level 4 would flock to using top-level domains in these non-Latin characters so that everything looked like it was coming from the same script. And apparently that hasn't happened. So this was a surprise, but that's because engineers don't know anything about culture. And, they're Philistines. So obviously something is different than the model that I anticipated. And I hope that in the course of the discussion we can figure that out. So that's where things stand right now. We are fully functional on top-level domains. We're fully functional in the use of internationalized strings in the domain names. We're fully functional using Unicode in the text of HTML on the web pages, and we are only just getting going on using these strings in the email, for example. So I'll stop there, and I'm not sure where you want to take this rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Vint. during the ICANN Toronto meeting, there was I just want to catch up with what just said. That during the ICANN Toronto meeting was an interesting presentation by Sianic, and they just informed that they had launched the first fully IDN email, and they say that from that moment they expect to see an uptake of .cn IDN domain names. So I'm very curious to see that as well, because probably that will make a shift in the uptake of IDNs.
Could I intervene one more time? I failed to mention one other problem area. It's called bi-directional scripts. It's very, very, it's problematic to have a domain name that has labels that are in different scripts, some going right to left and some going left to right. And there are some conditions under which it is impossible, to correctly render. Do I need this attached to my nose, or how? Is this okay? All right. So the big problem is that in bidirectional strings, figuring out how to render those strings correctly becomes quite difficult, especially if there are dots in the middle. And there are some situations where the dot moves and you don't see what was intended. So I don't think we've resolved all of those cases, and the only mechanism that was available to solve the edge cases was to say don't register that particular label because it won't be renderable in a reliable way. And this may also be a problem in the email.
Indeed. Thanks again, Vint. And I'd like to give the floor to Yanis Karklins of Unesco. And Unesco has been producing this report with us as they did last year, and we are extremely happy, and it's a great partnership we would like to continue in the next years. And I'd like to leave the floor to Yanis to speak about UNESCO multilingualism. How do what things, let's say, findings of the report surprised Yanis? What do you think is going to be the future of multilingualism? What can we do to support multilingualism? Thank you.
So thank you, Giovanni, and likewise from UNESCO side, we're very pleased with this cooperation and the outcome and the production of this world report. I will maybe continue what Vint was telling about a little bit of the history of development of IDNs from technical perspective. There was also certain developments from the policy perspective, and I still remember that one evening, it was in 2007 or 8, in one of the Gulf countries, where myself, Teresa Swinehart, and Chris Despain, we were kind of not cornered but surrounded by representatives from the region, and they almost told us, we will not let you go from here if you will not do something with internationalized domain names. We understood that the request or the market is there. There is a need. And Teresa drafted the email to Paul Toomey, President and CEO of ICANN at that time. And that was the beginning of what we know now, fast track IDN CC TLD fast track process. We succeeded with the policy work fairly quickly because there was this hype on let's do it and then life will be completely different. And this was indeed very interesting policy process with a big demand from member states, from user side. And this report currently was, or the whole process actually, last year's report and then this report and the one will come next year, is intended to really to analyze and understand what favors the use of IDN CCTLDs and what are obstacles which need to be overcome. because many hours of work have been put in developing IDNs from technical point of view. And I think that we have reached the moment that we have a house, we have everything which is needed for the roof, but we do not still have a roof. And we need to put that roof, and of course as we see from the report, the applications either by in the browsers or in social media or particularly in email is something which will sort of finalize this house, if I may say. And of course everybody is very eager to get this house ready that we can use. There is also an aspect which we need to understand in answering your comment, why the direct migration did not happen. Because if there is no, let's say, the same commercial value of the domain name as it is in ASCII with the ASCII extension, then people think twice, and no matter how attached they are to the language, if there is no immediate benefit or immediate convenience in using that, there is a certain period until the uptake takes place. This report for UNESCO means the possibility and argumentation to make a policy statement geared towards governments of the world where Latin is not used as a script for the language, suggesting that there are opportunities, upcoming opportunities, and what role governments or what steps governments should play in facilitating this uptake and introduction of internationalized domain names. We take as granted that those who speak languages in Latin script, or those who speak English or French or any language in Latin script, that Latin alphabet is known everywhere and everybody knows it. And believe me, it's not true. As I do not recognize, I can identify that Arabic alphabet, but I have no idea what sign means what. So the same applies to ASCII characters. There might be people, and I believe not 1 billion on this planet, who do not recognize ASCII characters. So for them, that might be an obstacle. And if we really can offer the full package of services, we may hope that then the IDNs will really take off and start living their lives. It was also very interesting to see the different scenarios after introduction of IDNs. Number of IDNs were introduced at the same time in Russia, in China, in other countries, in some Arab countries. I think Egypt was also one of the first ones who got it. And what are the different scenarios? And again, the analysis allows us to understand what influences those different uptakes and different scenarios and countries. And again, for UNESCO, it is very useful to understand and use these arguments in our policy work, in advocacy work with our governments. We are willing to also to engage on the basis of findings of this report with organizations of technical nature, and I see already drafting the letter addressed to chairman of IETF, maybe to CEO of Facebook or Twitter, encouraging them to work on IDN capabilities of the services they provide, or encouraging technical community to work on necessary technical solutions, that they feel this gentle and friendly pressure from the outside, and that is always very stimulating. So thank you, EURid, thank you, Emily, for the work done, and we will certainly be willing to present this report to the member states of UNESCO during the WSIS review conference in February next year, again to just to show what are advantages and what policies should be put in place in order to make IDNs live and used in their countries. So thank you, Giovanni.
Thanks a lot, Yanis. And I'd just like to catch up with what you just said about the role of certain providers, the role that can play to support IDNs. And I would just like to ask a question to Vint, as in your foreword you just mentioned that one of the possible issues against the uptake of IDNs is the indexation of the content. So how this relate, what can be done, what could be a few ideas to share with us to improve also IDN uptake via the indexation of content?
So the issue here is twofold. First of all, in the current World Wide Web, the way you point to things is to use domain names and other World Wide Web strings like HTTP:// if you use a domain name to build a URL and that domain name is not maintained, if you don't pay your yearly fees, then that URL may no longer resolve. Or alternatively, it may resolve, that is to say, an IP address may be associated with it which is not the one that you intended. So you can imagine producing documents or other digital objects, putting them on a machine which has a particular domain name, and leaving them there for a while, and then forgetting to pay for your domain name registration, and someone else gets that domain name and actually puts content on whichever machine that domain name resolves to now with the new owner. And now one of the old URLs, if it's simple enough and it doesn't have a lot of the additional right-hand side characters, parameters, is referenced, you may land on a website and pull up a web page that you didn't create, that somebody else did. And this is particularly awkward if it turns out it lands on a website that has not very nice material on it. So your old pointer goes from being resolvable to a place where your information is, to not resolvable at all, to resolvable to a place where your information is not, but somebody else's is. So you create ambiguity by a domain name which is not maintained in perpetuity. My concern here is that if the internationalized domain names are registered and then are found not to be particularly useful or attractive and people abandon them, the objects that were associated with them may disappear, or worse, the domain name resolves to the thing that it did not originally point to. So this all has to do with the funny dynamics of domain names. Before we were charging for them, it didn't matter. When you got one, it was yours. You kept it and you used it or you didn't, but no one else was reassigned that domain name, so the trap didn't occur. It might not resolve anymore, but it certainly doesn't resolve to the wrong place. As soon as we monetized domain names, for very good reasons, because the infrastructure needed to be paid self-supporting or self-sustaining, we created the possibility of a domain name that would expire for lack of payment and could then be confused with new information. There is a solution to the problem. One of them is a system called the Handle system, developed by Bob Kahn, who is still at CNRI, where strings are generated, pointers are generated, that are not ever reused. And if you never reuse them, then the worst that can happen is it points to nothing, but no one else is assigned that string. So the Handle system is intended to be a way of referencing information for arbitrarily long periods of time. So those are the kinds of things that have worried me about domain names in general, not just IDNs. But if it turns out that IDN uptake is somehow weak, or it gets tried and then is abandoned, we may have these expiring and disappearing content pointers. And that, of course, would not be a good outcome.
Thanks a lot, Vint. And as we spoke, and Yanis mentioned some of the examples of successful examples of IDN uptake, especially IDN at the top level. I would like to leave the floor to Minjun Park, and she will speak about the experience in Korea. And again, Korea together with the Russian Federation, those are the two most successful examples of IDN uptake at the top level so far. So thanks a lot, Minjun.
Thank you, Giovanni, and I'd like to first thank EURid and Unesco for organizing this workshop for IDNs and for giving us the opportunity to talk about our status and the issues related to IDNs in Korea. My name is Min Jung. I work for KISA, a governmental agency managing the domain names and IP addresses in Korea. Let me first briefly introduce you of Korean CCTLD. We call it 닷한국. This is the Korean representation for our country. We have launched 닷한국 in May last year, 2011. And it turned out to be quite successful. We had about 220,000 registrations by the end of 2011. Since the launch of 닷한국 last year, we've been receiving some complaints from the end users about the limited usability of 닷한국 domain names. Not so surprisingly, most of the complaints were from mobile phone users. Korea has a very high penetration rate of internet, and 60% of the population are smartphone users. So we can see that the most complaints came from the mobile users in Korea. Some of the issues, main issues that we have confronted were about the browser problem. Some of the browsers were not supporting IDNs, and we also found out that the Android phone users they had problems with IDN links. The automated link servers were not provided for IDN users in Korea.
Mr. Chairman, may I intervene briefly?
Please do so.
First of all, I'm not going to try to defend anything. Sometimes software doesn't work. What would be extremely helpful, and I would ask as an action item, if it has not already happened, that documentation about the problem be made available, and I will see to it gets to the people responsible for the Android development.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, thank you, Mr. Vint, because Korea has been having some problems in contacting the right person about this problem, and yes, and thank you for the assistance. And yes, these were some of the problems that we were confronted with, and the browser problem was solved as the browsers, the Internet Explorer, the MS, has provided the upgraded version, providing the support for the IDNs. So it has been solved, but the IDN link problem has still remained. So we have to work with the relevant stakeholders, and so we've been working with the application developers and mobile phone manufacturers as well, Korean portal site and etc. to improve the usability of 닷한국 since last year, and we've had some success in some part, but we are still tangling with some other issues. And we also plan to promote some more promotions and campaigns to promote the use of 닷한국 domain names, such as, for example, cooperating with the public service agencies to put the Korean names as their main URL to make it more, to raise the user awareness. We had about 220,000 registrations last year, but it had dropped to I just found out that it dropped to 100,000. So it's a sharp decrease. We've actually we found out that there were about 30% of actual use of domain names last year. So internally, we had a discussion about whether to have a promotion or campaign targeted to the annual renewal date, which will be May. But we decided to have the campaign at the end of the year because we didn't think the actual usage rate was healthy. So we decided to let it drop. We didn't think that it would drop this much, but we ended up with 100,000, we say, healthy registrations, about more than half of them in actual usage rate. So we plan to have a very aggressive campaign with the cooperation of the governmental agencies and public service sectors, as well as our registrars, starting end of this year, which will go on till next year. So we hope to see a more healthier growth in the registrations of IDNs in Korea. And with the growth of IDN emails, probably next year, we are also expecting to have a more uptake in the IDNs in the near future. And yes, thank you. This is the status of Korea for time being. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Min-Jung. Can I ask you something, because you just mentioned something that I spent about 10 years in the registry business now, and you spoke about healthy registrations. And do you think it's valuable to have another campaign to promote IDNs, to push volumes, or shouldn't we, because under .eu we have implemented IDNs as well, shouldn't we push the use rather than volumes? So to push more, to work more on healthy registration, those registration that domain names that are effectively used.
Yes, we also had a very hot debate on that specific subject, and our conclusion was to focus on the healthy usage first, and to promote the volume, as a next step. But it's just like in chicken and egg game. It's this, it's vice versa. It goes hand in hand. You need to have more volume to make people aware of the IDNs, and to make it as a pressure to the application developers, also as the famous sites, to actually implement the IDN supporting programs. So the volume is important, yes, but we decided to go with the usage, the actual usage first, and then to target the volume next. Yes.
Thank you. And I saw Yanis wanted to intervene.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask one question in relation to situation in Korea. What is the participation or enthusiasm of the government agencies in applying and running IDN domains of their own?
For the time being, most of the governmental agencies, I guess more than 90%, have the domains used with Korean CCTLD. But the problem is not many of them are using Korean CCTLD domain name as their main domain name. So they are still using ASCII domain names to promote their homepages. So we are trying to persuade them to use more Korean version of URL to promote their service.
Please, Vint and then Emily. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to let Emily go ahead.
Well, it's really an observation listening to Min-Jung, because when we were looking at the diverse experiences in uptake of IDNs, actually the Korean Republic, or the Republic of Korea, stood out as one of the countries which had the most favourable environment for uptake, for strong uptake. Particularly the cultural linguistic homogeneity, excellent broadband penetration and presence of IXPs, so I think that the experiences that you're describing as this being not just a one-off thing that you can just flick a button and then wham, everything's suddenly multilingual. It's the steps, the small steps that you have to take, and the involvement of multiple stakeholders, both as super users and very visible users, trying to motivate the application creation industry to see this as something that they must serve because there's a benefit, and also to harness the marketing power and the channel to market of your registrars. I think just my observation is that when you look at the IDN readiness, if you like, that we think your country should have, and the incredibly positive steps and positive outlook that you obviously have towards IDN uptake, it just, I think, highlights the scale of the challenge in moving towards a multilingual addressing system, in my view.
I recall having a discussion with a colleague whose use of IDNs was primarily Chinese, and I was speculating there that once the IDNs were available there would be a very rapid uptake, and I was told that it might not happen that way because many of the people who would normally be expected to enter these internationalized domain names found it harder to enter those than they did to enter the ASCII characters in the first place. And in fact, I don't know if this is true for the Korean case, but in China, someone typing on a keyboard will often type an ASCII string whose pronunciation sounds like the letter that they want or the symbol that they want, and then a drop-down menu pops up and they pick the one that they wanted, which, although I'm amazed at how quickly people can do that, it looks very clumsy. And so the result is that sometimes the ASCII characters are preferred. Now, I'd be happy to hear some better information. I have a feeling that Ms. Park is going to tell me what happens in Korea.
Well, actually, Korea's case is different from China case because we have a Korean alphabet. It works the same way as the Latin alphabet, so you can just type it as it is. Yes. The one problem that we are facing with the mobile phone users again is that we've been trying to persuade the mobile phone manufacturers, just as Samsung and Apple, to have a keypad to put the just like they have a .com key, but the problem is that you need to type in much more letters. If you type in 닷한국, it's actually composed of 6 letters. It's 2 characters, but you need to type 6 more letters. .com, it's COM, it's 3 letters, and you have to type in with this small mobile keypad. So you're trying to persuade them, but the problem is the volume is not that much, so they're not willing to put that much money in. So it's one of the problems that we are still facing. Yep.
Excuse me, but don't you make a lot of these in Korea?
Yes, so we are still talking with Samsung as well, but they won't listen for the moment. For your persuading harder.
If the people that make them in Korea don't want to make them for you, I don't know what to do about that.
We'll try harder. Yeah.
Okay, but you committed for the Android matter.
What I've committed in the Android matter is to convey the problem to the people who have to decide whether and how they will solve it.
Okay, at least that. Okay, so thanks a lot, Minjun, again. And I'd like to move from 닷한국 to Africa with the experience of Arashel Ine, who recently joined Afrinica. and she will share a bit of the what are the issues, what are the African community is currently facing as for IDNs, and if there is a demand of IDNs in Africa, or other priorities are there. So I'd like to leave the floor to Arashal. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni, and thanks to EURid and UNESCO for inviting me to talk on this panel. So the perspective, yes, I'm going to talk about mostly, Africa south of the Sahara, because, as you know, from the experience of ICANN, a lot of the area in the north that speaks Arabic is practically covered. Africa is, I think you all know, one of the places where we have the most languages, on Earth. About 15 or 1,600 out of the 35,000 that exist. So, yes, it's they're very diverse. Most of them are not written, but the ones that can be written can also be written with the Latin, Arabic, or Nko alphabets. Nko is one of those that is invented by some of the African linguists from Cameroon. That is already an issue. The fact that they're not written, and the fact that, they can be written in so many different alphabets. My dad was one of those first UNESCO experts back in the 60s who actually coded the alphabets for some of the African languages, and I grew up with like 6 different ones. So this has been very dear to me from a very, very early age. The African Ministerial Conference on Education actually agreed that in 2010 that dual-track education should be a standard in Africa. And this is also a way of basically making sure that African languages uptake comes up. But having said that, the issue is when you do not have, so you do have alphabets, but when in the same country you have experts that would write the same language in Arabic, in Nko, or in Latin, then there isn't a right standard to follow. So which one do you choose? Which one do you actually take to, do the education in schools is something that is, not done. And a lot of times we have the issue of also finding, having gone to the ministerial meeting and having said, yes, dual track education is a must, making sure that that happens on the ground is not easy, because you need the linguists to agree on the alphabet. You need, after that, the material to be produced, and you need, the kids to really start learning it, and curriculum, that would be, of course, teaching that. So, but, there are a few advances. You have places in Africa where, for example, Swahili, being one of the languages, is taught. Hausa is also done. And Hausa is done either with, again, Latin or Arabic alphabet. And, Amharic is one of the languages that we have also in the eastern part of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, where, they're literate in those languages. So we have quite a few people working on the encoding. It's been done, but that has not been, translated into content, for example, on the internet or in African languages. And this is just because, again, first, you need people who ask for that content. Given that we have a lot of literacy issues, and we have quite a few countries where literacy rates are low, we have, issues with people who would simply read. And then, coupled with that now is the uptake of internet on mobile devices, whereby basically, people tend to, speak and go look up things that are, let's say, more on the iconic and graphical stuff more than anything, because they don't know how to read. You know, so yesterday I was on a panel, and this is one of the things that we were debating, how to actually make sure that the uptake of also languages and content on the internet in African languages come when we have a place where we have, you know, the next billion that will come, or hundreds of millions that will come from our region, will most probably be, you know, on mobile devices, and might be working with those icons that they recognize, that are becoming, you know, the lingua franca of basically the internet, and especially on, you know, tablets and things like that, instead of the regular language. So we're not too sure what that will give, but this is one of the things that we're working on. And I've been working with the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, and some of the things that we're trying to experiment is actually a few things with distance labs that are being provided by, you know, IEEE and a few others that we're kind of pushing in you know, how do you say, pilot kind of projects to see how that will work. So this is where we stand. And of course, one of the issues that we're having is also that in terms of CCTLDs, for example, in the African region, taking it up is just simply that the architecture and the infrastructure is not strong enough. And, you know, the people who are doing that are not savvy enough in terms of, how do you say, you know, what to do basically to get IDNs out there available. But, you know, markets exist, and niches like, for example, I won't name names, but, you know, a phone operator has been able to have phones that speak, you know, Swahili and Amharic in those niche markets, and it's absolutely fabulous. You know, you can't go to those countries and find a phone that speaks the Latin and whatever alphabet. I wouldn't know how to dial a number if I was using that phone, because it speaks Amharic, or it speaks so Swahili. If the device is Swahili in Latin characters, I can still do it, but if it's in Arabic, it's a bit difficult. So this is where we stand in the region. A lot of challenges. Thank you.
Thanks to you and Rachel. And I just would like to say that we have a moderator for the remote participation. And if there's any question coming from the remote participants, or if there's any question from the audience, doesn't mean that the people that are on this side, they're all the only one to speak, but please feel free to ask questions and interact with us. So thanks again, Rachel, and I'd like to pass the floor to Baher Hazmat of ICANN, and I would like Baher to touch base on what ICANN is currently doing to support IDNs. What you know, we are all aware of the process launched by ICANN several years ago, I think 4 years ago now, for having the IDN CCTLD fast track. We have seen the new GTLD application with a limited number of IDNs. So thanks, Baer, for sharing your information, your knowledge about these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first congratulate Unesco and EURid on this excellent piece of work, the report. I've had the chance to go through the soft version of the report a while back, and I found it very informative and providing very interesting analysis that is not only useful to, you know, us as experts in the field, but I guess it also establishes a foundation for, you know, further work to be done, especially on the usability aspect of IDNs, given the experiences of registries, registrars, end user community, application providers, and so on. So that's really a very a good step forward. On ICANN and what is going on at ICANN, so we we introduced IDNs at the top level, and we thought we're done, but apparently we're not. And what is coming is probably more difficult, and what is going on right now is much more complex than what has been done in terms of fast track or having IDN TLDs used by people in web browsers and so forth. So a couple of years ago, ICANN community started an effort to look into the issue of variants. And just for those who are not familiar with the term, variant is a term that has been used in very different ways. And after almost a year of study on what variants are, conclusion was that there isn't a single definition of variants. So it basically indicates that there is some sort of relationship between labels, whether the full label or some characters of the label, and this relationship varies according to the script itself. So in some cases, relationship implies that those variant labels should be dealt with as if they were one label. In some other cases, it could be that if we are allowing one label to go on the DNS system, then the rest of the variants should be banned or reserved or blocked or whatever. So the variant issue as an issue has been looked at through a series of case studies in 6 different scripts: ASCII, Arabic, Chinese, Devanagari, Cyrillic, and Greek. And this was through community experts who led the work through working groups and all this, and they came up with a set of reports identifying the issues that either relate to a specific script or general issues that has to be addressed at a more of an overarching level at the DNS level or the root level. And the same reports also identified a number of areas that require further work to be done. Among those areas are 3 that again ICANN and ICANN community have already started working on. One is related to the user experience, the usability aspect, and this seemed from the reports to be the most important or one of the most important aspects, because it tackles or it addresses a number of areas, from end user being the registrant who register domain name, or the user who just uses the browser or email or any kind of online service, or it could be the application developer who develops software, or it could be the system administrator who runs networks and DNS services and so on. It could be the registrar who offers the service, or the registry who maintains the zone file, and so on. And so there is one working group dedicated for this particular area, and they issued an interim report, and public comments have been received, and from now till probably the next ICANN meeting in Beijing in the next 6 months, there will be more work on the final report that will be presented then. The other 2 areas relate to what we call the IDN table, and this is simply the table that identifies the characters that could be used for the specific script or language. And in the IDN table aspect, there are two issues. One is the rules needed to generate the labels and to identify the labels that could or could not go on the route. And again, there is a dedicated working group looking at this issue. And the third and last working group is looking at the format of the IDN table, because ever since we started having IDNs even at the second level, ICANN and through the IANA repository has been maintaining the IDN tables for the scripts that have been used, but there hasn't been any specific format or even sort of policy or rules or anything that defines how the table should look like, what it should and it should not include, and all this. So there is an internet draft that sort of provided the initial view on using something like XML as a standard technology for that, and again people could and actually have provided comments on this draft, and again in the next couple of months the process will continue through IETF on developing this draft to the next steps. So this is what is going on with regard to variants. On a different track, the CCNSO, and this is the constituency within ICANN that look after CCTLD policy issues. The CCNSO has been working on the long-term policy of IDN CCTLDs, because what happened in the fast track, when the fast track was introduced 3 years ago, the thought was that the fast track is a fast track. It does not tackle each and every aspect of the IDNs. And it was a short-term solution. So the long-term solution is having a long-term policy on IDN CCTLDs, and this is something that we've been doing some progress with, and just to mention a part of it which relates to the use of geographical names in IDN CCTLDs, how the country names would look like in different languages and scripts. And this is something UNESCO is helping ICANN with and helping the CCNSO with through their participation in the working group that is looking into this aspect. And UNESCO has issued a survey to some of their member states, 30-something member states, asking a set of questions on how their country name would look like in different languages. And when we talk about country names, we're talking about official names, we're talking about short names, we're talking about famous or popular names, and so on. So this is another track of effort. Something else that is also taking place right now is what we call the universal acceptance. And previous speakers have touched upon this issue when they mentioned, applications or services like Facebook and others, when you can't have or see addresses or names in IDNs. And the issue of universal acceptance, in fact, is more broader than the IDNs. It even with any new top-level domain, whether in ASCII or in any other language, the fact that many of the online applications do not recognize new top-level domains for the simple fact that the reason they those applications verify that this is a TLD is somewhat based on very like hard-coded sort of tools that are not updated regularly. So there have been discussions within the ICANN community, with the technical community, with folks from business, from companies, and so on. And this is actually an effort that our role there is merely to raise awareness. It's not really, it's more of community effort. We need businesses, we need Facebooks and the likes to do more effort there to get those names recognized in a very efficient way. So I will stop here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions if any. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Baher. I was about to stop you in any case. Okay. And I just wanted to ask you something, because I don't know if you have any perception what could be the currently after the new GTLD application round, what could be the real demand for new GTLD, new IDN GTLD? Did you hear anything in the community? I heard a lot of passion in your voice for all IDN-related matters, and I think that comes also from the fact that ICANN has developed a set of policies in different areas. You mentioned the variants, you mentioned the IDN fast track for CCTLDs, and all these policies have been refined over the years as they were subject to some sort of criticism from the community. But I must say that ICANN has taken on board a lot of the comments and input from the community, so those policies have greatly changed. But what would be next for the new IDN GTLDs? What do you think is going to be the demand of those IDN GTLDs?
Well, I think so. We've received 116 IDN GTLD applications with a range of scripts. I think, answering your question, I think it's very difficult to predict. I think one of the lessons learned from introducing IDN at the top level and fast track and all this, it's really very difficult to predict the demand. So we've been hearing different feedback from the various language communities. So for some people, the variant issue is very important, and people say there is no way IDN could make it to the top without having variants, and that's more required for GTLDs more than for CCTLDs. For others, it could be other stuff like, again, the applications and the Facebook and all the usability aspects. So the short answer, it's very difficult to predict, to put it this way.
Thank you, Bayer. Maybe we hear a long answer from a very senior representative, Pat Kane. And thanks, Pat, for taking the floor. Really appreciate that, as many .com IDN.
Thank you very much. The question of demand really is a difficult question, because right now, when you talk about 116 applications, there's supplier demand. We certainly have a lot of people who would like to offer those products, and just as an example of what we have within .com and .net is today we have about 1.3 million domain names in .net that are IDNs, largely Chinese, Korean, a tremendous number in Germany, and a tremendous number in Turkey, which was a surprise to us. So it's interesting. But when we go out and do demand studies, there's not a lot of demand. I mean, there's a lot of preference. When we do a lot of preference studies as well to say, you want a .com, you want a .cn, you want a .chinese that's a CCTLD, a .chinese that's a GTLD, and so there's a lot of preference. Right now there's not a lot of trust because people aren't accustomed to seeing them. So when they say, well, I don't know what that is, I wouldn't want that because I don't trust it. It's not meaningful to me, whereas a .cn would be meaningful inside of China. A .com is meaningful inside of China. So we struggle with the demand as well. And we just kind of take a look that we've got more anecdotal demand than we do actual hard data that says if you put out a something in Hangul or in Arabic that you would have these kinds of registrations. People would begin to use them, but the challenge is, one of the things you were talking about with the universal acceptance, is that we've not done a good job of investing in tools. I mean, I was sitting the other day, thinking about this before I came. As I logged into my E-Trade account, I'm sitting there going, what if I had an IDN? And I had to get my password. I couldn't get it because I couldn't type in sakura.com. I couldn't type that in. So we have more to do, and I think one of the great things that ICANN could do for us is to help facilitate the development or commission the development of tools that people could pick off of a menu and say, I'll plug this into my website, because people don't know how to code for it. The RFCs are built. People know what they should do, but people are not always able to code themselves into it. So I think there's a way that we could actually do some of those things with some of the money that we're sitting on in terms of application fees to help facilitate that and actually drive it. Because we can't just declare victory and say we've satisfied the suppliers. We really have to figure out how to get real adoption. So.
Thanks a lot. Extremely interesting, and we'll see in the coming years. And it's Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, please.
I apologize. It turns out that I have an appointment at 4 o'clock with Minister Vasey, and I need to excuse myself. But I did want to respond to something that occurred to me as you were talking about domain names and demand. There is obvious utility in the IDNs in country where languages are present, and we heard from Emily about the strong correlations there. It also occurred to me that for people who want to market in places where those languages are spoken, products and services, regardless of where the supply is, would also be interested in having domains of this type, assuming that those domains were more readily recognized by the target. So if I wanted to market a product, let's say in Saudi, I would probably be smart to market it written in Arabic rather than written in English, on the presumption that the target market is more likely to recognize and even discover the product if it's described in Arabic, and the domain names might similarly be more easily recognized. But of course, I'm making all this up. I don't know if it's true.
Well, I think there's a great opportunity in those marketplaces to grow demand. It's just right now there's not a lot of current demand when we do the studies, because there's not trust in what you're selling. I think the Chinese marketplace has got more experience from that standpoint, because CNIC has got some regionally resolving domain names that they control within their borders. So the experience set is there, and it's growing in those areas. In other areas, they don't have that same opportunity.
Okay, I'd like to thank both for this interesting, let's say, appendix of our discussion. And I'd like to say also thank you so much to Vint for participating and for Nice Forward. I also thank you, Baher and Rachel. They host other workshops. We expect to finish in about 10-15 minutes from now. And so thanks again to the speakers who are leaving now. I'd like to give the floor to Markus Kummer of ISOC, who joined this panel. And ISOC, there has been a study developed by ISOC, Unesco, and OECD, which is mentioned in the World Report, and it's a study that correlates basically the presence of local infrastructure and local language content. I would like to see what is the perspective of the internet here. What is the perspective of the internet society about IDNs and multilingualism, and how the internet society could complement the current efforts to promote multilingualism and also IDNs. Thank you, Markus.
Thank you, and my apologies for having been late to this workshop. And listened with great interest. These are fascinating presentations, and I have to say, I don't really have to add that much. I'm definitely not an expert on IDN, and the Internet Society hasn't worked much on IDN, but we have indeed co-produced a study with OECD and UNESCO on the relationship between local content, internet development, and access prices. But before that, I would like take a little bit a step back and say, it was a great leap forward, the introduction of IDN. When you think back to the World Summit on the Information Society, it was one of the big issues, the multilingualization of the internet. And without any doubt, with the introduction of the IDN, you make it possible for people with another language than English as a native language to access the internet easier. And yes, many people speak English as a second language, but there are millions out there who don't have a second language apart from their local language. And of course, we as Internet Society welcome every step that enhances diversity on the internet. And listening to this discussion, actually, it is a very good illustration of enhanced cooperation. We had yesterday a one-day event on enhanced cooperation, and here the cooperation you see between UNESCO and ICANN, technical community, is an example of how the internet actually works, people working together, and that is enhanced cooperation, and worth underlining. Well, our study basically proves what we already knew. Develop local content and keep the traffic local. That's how you develop the internet. And indeed, the study finds empirical evidence that this indeed is the case. I mean, there is, of course, the philosophical aspect that local content is the heritage of the society, and it is important for their culture, for their societal development. And most people are actually mostly interested in content in their own language, wherever they are from. And I'm sure you all experience that when you travel abroad. You're most interested actually in your local paper or whatever, wherever you're from. And obviously their IDNs are the key to go further. And we, as a small aside, we would have hoped that the new GTLD process would have produced more proposals in IDN precisely to enhance diversity. So we hope there will be more to come, and we also hope that the CCs will help to spread the message and to wake interest, and particularly we could see a potential interest for local communities to have their own GTLD in IDN. Yes, and what the study finds basically is it goes hand in hand with building internet exchange points, developing local content, and that in the end brings down the prices. So it is a virtual circle. Now what is first is the question, where to start. But I think you have to start at all levels. I mean, yes, you need to have internet exchange points to bring down prices, and yes, to have to encourage local content, and yes, to have to encourage IDN. And we, as Internet Society, we have done in the past, had workshops with CCTLDs in developing countries, and we see that as a good vehicle to move forward. CCTLDs are usually sort of the hub of the local internet community, and they can use these workshops for explaining, for creating interest, for reaching out. In the end, I think the proof of the pudding of the new GTLD program will be, has it not enhanced diversity on the internet, and there we definitely are interested in contributing to diversity. So these are my short remarks.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. Yes, please. There's a microphone there. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Nabil Ben Amar from Morocco. I'm ISOC ambassador this year, and I appreciate articles written by Emily about IDNs, about IPv6 in Kuwait, Arab IGF. I meet you there. So I think that although some technical challenges have been already solved, there's still more to do to achieve this noble goal of truly multilingual internet, where values like transparency, tolerance, mutual understanding are the main characteristics. IDNs are a very good initiative by ICANN, and since we have IDN.IDN, so at the first level, it has solved many problems for no Latin scripts. So, for example, as an Arabic internet user, I can find my way around the web with my own language. For example, when I want to access to Al Jazeera website, for example, there are many possibilities how to spell these words using Latin characters. It can be Al Jazeera with 2E or 1E, or I if I have a French background. So, because this is an Arabic word that has been written using no Arabic scripts. However, there is one Arabic spelling for this word, which is Al Jazeera Nokta net. So, in Arabic is one possibility. However, I think that registration of IDNs have been available for the first, second level. It became possible to register IDNs under interested country code top level domains, like .Saudia or .Masr, it's a great steps toward this multilingual. However, I think that we still have we still need some other applications or service to be multilingual, like email. So since so when other internet service like email will be possible with no Latin scripts, I think we will surely be in the era of truly multilingual internet. So what do you think about these other services apart from web or IDNs in general? Thank you.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
I think that I know that we're very, very short of time. Was there something from the remote that did you want to just take the floor for that? Cedric, did you want to take the floor for the remote participation questions? Or?
Okay. We need a microphone for you to speak.
Well, while we're getting the microphone, okay.
Oh, okay. Question to Mr. Janice. Rudy126 asks that, is the next generation of the internet going to focus more on the language aspect than the technical issues?
So I'm not sure that I really understood the question. I think if we look back in about 10 years, starting from our engagement in the World Summit, the landscape of issues we're talking about is changing, and in 2003, 2005 until maybe 2007, the access and infrastructure development issues were really on the top of the agenda, and it was basically the only concern, if I may say, of internet users, particularly in Africa, in Latin America, and in Asia. Today, with the boost of mobile technologies, we see that less and less people are concerned about access. Well, still they are concerned about prices of access, what they have to pay, but not that much that they would not have possibility to access internet. But what we see on the rise are the questions related to actual use of internet. And in that sense, answer is yes. I think in the future we will be talking much more about use of internet in general terms, rather than access to the internet, because that issue is about to be resolved for the good.
Thanks a lot, Yanis, and I'd like to give the floor to Emily for a quick final word.
Okay, thank you very much, Giovanni, and thank you to all of the panelists, and to as we started late, inevitably everything's got squeezed, and I have a feeling that we could continue our discussions in a much more interactive way had we more time. So thank you for your patience on that. I think what we've heard today is that the first steps in creating a more multilingual addressing system are there, but the journey is certainly not over. The house doesn't have the roof on, to mix my metaphors horribly. We seem to have homed in on the user experience as the next great challenge, the difference between preference and trust and the gulf that lies between the two, the role of the CCTLD registry as providing a local hub that can enable and foster a really thriving environment for multilingualism. I think in the next few years we will see whether these stand or fall. There are great challenges, but I think we should also, as Yanis encourages us to do, we should step back and actually see that an awful lot of ground has been covered in a very, very short time, thanks to the goodwill and cooperation of multiple parties. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I have Yanis, a final word from Yanis.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like just to say how important it is to continue this analysis and data gathering. Data gathering most probably is the most difficult part of this exercise, and I would like to encourage all those who are interested, or all those who are working in this area and collecting either empirical data or just a survey public opinion, maybe to join us in this effort and share that information to the extent possible, that we can make these analyses and conclusions on the basis of most possible information. And certainly our intention is to continue this work also in the future. We will, as I said, present the report to UNESCO member states in February, at the end of February, during the WSIS review conference. And I hope that in the meantime we will already start our advocacy work based on findings of this report. So thank you very much for your interest, and see you next year.
Thanks a lot, Yanis. Thanks again, Minjun, Marcus, Yanis, Emily, Pat, who contributed with the appendix, and also to Cedric for the remote participation. Thanks a lot to everybody.